So, okay, I'm going to be really honest with you and tell you that this week I've been in deep thought about just how to put some things together that I feel like God wants me to preach in this upcoming period of time. And it's difficult because it's things that have to do with a deeper understanding of our faith, of our spiritual journey. And it's not just so much that our Christianity today doesn't always look or sound like Jesus. It's also that for most people, we've been taught the Christian faith in a way that's not really making most people more free or more joyful, or maybe most importantly, more capable of love. And I'm not being critical. That's a description of much of my own faith journey over the years. It did not make me more free. It did not make me more joyful. And it did not make me more capable of love. And so I'm in a season of my life, just trying to be vulnerable with you. I'm in a season of my life where I am so deeply aware that there's more to this journey, even than I have known. That it's deeper, that it's more whole, more beautiful. And I want to grow in these things, and I want to try to help you grow in them. And I realize as I say that, some of you are probably like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, eventually, maybe you will. So I'm just going to try to crack the door of that open this morning with a simple message I've called Trying to See Bigger. And it might be a train wreck, but you'll show me grace if it is. There are times where I feel like the Lord is saying, preach this, and I just think, oh, that's so risky, But I'm so glad to be in such a gracious community with all of you. But the things that I want to share with you this morning, they grow out of these things that are stirring inside me. And by the way, you know probably that we're living in a time where it's even more obvious that there are different Christianities out there in our culture. You can no longer in our culture say Christianity and have everybody assume that we're all talking about the same thing with the same emphasis that has the same ends in mind. So as I was thinking about, in light of that, as I was thinking about these sermon series ideas, and I don't know quite how they're going to come together, but as I was thinking about these things over the last couple of weeks, I had this idea for a series. I always like taglines when I name a series and then it kind of has a little explanatory line, right? So the tagline for this one went like this: Billy Graham, Lauren Boebert, and Richard Rohr walk into a bar. Like the walk into a bar jokes. And I know somebody's hear that and say, that's political. No, that's not what I'm thinking of. What I'm thinking of is that these are three people who represent three very different ideas about what Christianity in the end really, about what Jesus came to bring us. I probably won't use that because, it'll upset somebody. But I'm thinking about it. You pray for me. But I had an experience just this Friday that caught me off guard. And it's so interesting that I was thinking about bigger things, seeing bigger things, about moving beyond our sort of perfunctory Christianity. And then I had this experience, and that's kind of where I want to start. And it's probably going to be most of my sermon, is just telling you this story. But Friday afternoon when I came home, Linda and I got into this conversation that started because Joanna, our daughter, had sent a video of our 13-year-old granddaughter, Esther, dancing. Joanna's a dancer, and Esther is growing up to be a dancer as well. And Linda was commenting on how far Esther had come in her form as a dancer, and how beautifully she arched her back, and how beautiful her movement was. And I commented how much more Esther was looking like a young lady than like a little girl, and how it seemed like it was all going by so fast, Same thing you think if you've had children, and then you go through the same thing with your grandchildren. How is it going by so fast? And then we digressed into remembering Esther as a little girl with these chubby cheeks and this squeaky little high voice that she doesn't have anymore. And as we're having this conversation, something is happening in the back of my mind, in the back of my soul. And the best way I can describe it is that I began to become aware, in a way that I'm not usually, of the magnitude of the journey that Linda and I, anyway, have had that brought us to this moment of being captivated by the dancing of a granddaughter. I started to think as we were sitting there, I started to think about all these pieces of the journey Linda and I have had in our lives. And that's not even really a good way to describe it. I didn't start to think about them. It was like they came flooding in. It was like I was, as we were sitting there talking, in the back of my mind, there was this recap of our shared life playing in the back, flooding in. I started thinking about growing up in different states, but in many ways very similarly, same kind of church experience. Our mothers both cooked from the Betty Crocker cookbook. We ate the same kind of meals growing up. We grew up in the same kind of neighborhoods. How we met in high school and dating after high school and coming to Jesus and then thinking we had everything figured out because we came to Jesus. And then leaving our Catholic roots behind and taking a pretty long kind of fundamentalist sort of journey in our faith, and then getting married at 20, and I'm overlapping these stories, but getting married at 20 and co-creating two beautiful children with God, and facing the illness of a child that we almost lost, and being beyond broke for over more than 2 decades, certainly, but God always keeping a roof over our heads and some mac and cheese and beanie weenie on our plates, literally, and hamburger helper. Running my small businesses, which were many decades of working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, going back to school for ministry, coming to Plainfield with no money, and really, I would have to say, in hindsight, no plan to start a church. And then completely remodeling and adding on to a ramshackle little house, which some of you were at a couple of weeks ago. Then our children getting married and moving away, and then grandchildren, 4 of them coming along, and friendships coming and going across these years, and the church thriving, and the church at times being near extinction. And across those years, I have to also mention part of our crazy adventure was the crazy adventure of our ministry in Haiti, which, by the way, in September, we're going to take a Sunday morning because so many of you are new to LifeSpring. You don't even know that story. You don't even know the story of this church's adventure in the poorest and most remote part of the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. And we're going to tell you that story, but in terms of our journey and my journey, I've been in Haiti during earthquake and hurricane devastation. I have sat and shared meals in dirt floor huts with the poorest of the poor. I've been held hostage. I've had our pickup truck stuck in the middle of the river at least a dozen times down there. When you're going home the next day and your pickup truck is stuck in the middle of the Grand Anse River, it's a really interesting moment because you say, well, I can't leave a $40,000 pickup truck in the middle of the river and I can't get it out. And what am I going to do? And I have climbed mountains that I thought were going to kill me, and I've slid down mountainsides on a motorcycle, and I've driven trucks on mountain roads so narrow that when you looked out the window, all you could see was the 1,000-foot drop. Also that we could get up into the mountains and build a school or build a church or do something. And I've thrown, more than once, I've thrown sick children in a pickup truck and driven all the way across Haiti to try to get them to a surgeon that might be able to solve their problem or save their life. And I've done almost all these things alongside people who are sitting with you this morning in this church community. And then in the last few years, we led this church through the biggest changes ever in its theology and its life, changes which I was not at all sure in certain moments that we would survive, and yet that journey has created the most beautiful church that I've ever been a part of. So Linda and I are sitting in the living room having this conversation about beautiful Esther and how fast it's going by, and this is what's playing in the back of my mind is what a wild journey, a crazy life, a beautiful life has all led to the moment where we're sitting here on the sofa talking about a beautiful granddaughter. And it was all just present to me. I can't explain it better than that. And I said something to Linda like, it's been a lot of journey. I mean, she didn't even know at that moment that all this is like caving in on me. And I said, boy, there's been a lot of journey that has brought us to this moment. And just as all those pieces of the journey had become present in the moment, I had also become very aware as they were playing in the back of my mind, my being, how imperfectly I had done so many parts of that journey, at times maybe almost irresponsibly, or at least how fragile and precarious it had been. I don't know if you've ever felt that about your life, but how for years I barely kept my family housed and fed, how instead of building a really solid career, I chased what a lot of people thought was the fool's errand of all this ministry stuff. When I told my friends I was going to come to Plainfield and plant a church, you know what they all said? Don't do it. It'll never work. Literally. And I thought, am I just chasing the wrong thing in life? How when this church was young and broke, I led the charge to pour vision and time and resources into blessing the poor in a place none of us had ever been or ever imagined. And I had made mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake in all those things across the years. And I think I said something to Linda in this conversation on Friday like, it's been an amazing journey, even though we've made a lot of mistakes, and I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. And I don't know how this happened, but at this point in the conversation, Linda and I started thinking about our parents. I don't know how the conversation transitioned there. We started thinking about our parents and how they played their parts, but they also played their parts imperfectly. Linda growing up longed for a kind of tender affection from her mom that her mom wasn't most of the time really able to give to her. And I always wanted another layer of closeness with my dad, who, I will tell you, my father to this day was the wisest and kindest man I have ever met. But I longed for another layer of closeness with him that he didn't really know, at least not in those younger years when we were younger, how to give to us. But along the way, years ago, Linda and I both realized that our parents and the families they grew up in did not get the things in the families they grew up in that would have made them naturally able to give us these more affectionate layers of love that we had longed for. There was a time in our younger lives where we said, how come they didn't give us this? And then there was a time years later where we said, oh, they received none of this. My dad grew up in a completely emotionally disconnected family. It's amazing that he became who he became, which his brothers never did. He did because he took a journey with God and my mom. But it's amazing that he became who he did become. So we start talking about our parents, and I started thinking about how a few years ago, my friend Brian Zarita got me researching my family genealogy. And if you've ever done this, the incomprehensible awareness one develops that your single life is the result of the unions of people who lived in faraway countries, who endured famines, who crossed oceans, who fought wars, who farmed farms, who worked in factories and did a million things you don't even know about and who are now long gone. And all of that tree came down to you taking your first breath in the world at some point. And maybe for the first time in my life, in that moment, in this conversation we were having on Friday, I was caught up in the actual awareness of how my life is part of what Aristotle and Plato and the medieval Catholic scholastics called the great chain of being. Like, it was all there, and it felt to me, and I know it when it happens, like we were sitting there on the couch having this conversation, all this is playing in the back of my mind, I'm seeing the connectedness of all these things, and the Spirit of God was like right here, just right here. And I'm sitting there on the sofa thinking about how my parents and Linda's parents lived a whole crazy journey in their lives imperfectly, and now Linda and I have lived what I think is an interesting and kind of crazy journey in our lives, also very imperfectly, and now our children are living their own, I hope not too crazy, but they would probably say sometimes crazy journey in their lives imperfectly. And now we come down to Caedmon and Esther and Manu and Remy, who are in the very beginning of their journey. And there's no way to really tell you what I was feeling, but it was like, we have a saying for it in Haitian Creole. They say, tête chargée, my head's exploding. Blow my mind is what we say in English. And then what came to me was the last words of St. Francis. The last thing Francis said to his friends was, I have done what was mine to do. I pray Christ will show you what is yours to do. In other words, now you must go follow God, and you must do what is yours. You must do what is yours to do. And Linda and I said to each other, our parents did what was theirs to do. And yes, it was imperfect, but it gave us the lives that we lived. And I said to Linda, and by this point, it's embarrassing, I'm sitting on the couch, I've got tears just down my face. And I said to her, you know, babe, we have done it really imperfectly, but we have done and are doing what has been ours to do. Hasn't been perfect, not even close. And it hit me that that dancing granddaughter and her 3 brothers and our amazing son and daughter, and for the little bit that can be credited to me, this beautiful church and the 300 kids who live in dirt floor huts and attend our School of Hope in Haiti, that in some little way, all these things came into being because we simply walked the road that was put in front of us, because we did what was ours to do. And I'm telling you this story this morning because I can feel my faith going from where I try to force reality to be a certain way, because that's what we do with our faith. We say, oh, I know God, and I know how everything's supposed to be. And so now I'm going to go out and I'm going to get everyone and everything to be the way that I know it's supposed to be. And I'm going to push and I'm going to cajole and I'm going to coerce and I'm going to do all these things. And my faith is going from a place, I can feel it going from a place where I try to force reality to be a certain way to one where I see that alongside the tragic nature of reality is flowing the grace that brings hope and the eventual possibility of something new. Linda even said it on Friday. She said, you know, in some ways, what my mom couldn't give me, do you remember this? Helped me realize who the mom was that I wanted to be. Do you see that? What my mom couldn't give me actually awakened me to some things that then I was able to try to give to my children. And I would tell you guys this morning, I can look back on the seasons of my life, our life, when the things I thought would destroy me ended up being transformed into seasons of awakening and change. I think you guys like having me as your friend and pastor these days. That's what I hear from some of you. And I want to tell you, I would not be the person that I am. I have 1,000,000 miles to go, but I would not be this version of Fran Lehman, except that there were certain points in my life where I thought everything was going over the cliff, and God used it somehow to help me see something I desperately needed to see. You remember the parable Jesus told where a farmer's enemy comes and he sows weeds into his field with the crops? And the master's servants come to him and they say, should we go out and rip up all the weeds? And the master says, no, because if you go out and rip up all the weeds, you're going to rip up all the wheat. And so you have to let them exist together. You have to let them grow up together, and at the time of the harvest, we'll sort it all out. Just think about that in the context we're in right now in our divided culture. In many ways, I don't see a way around a divided culture at this point, and it's heartbreaking to me. If I could snap my fingers and we could all talk to each other and everybody would have humility to learn and be honest and own their crap, and, if we could, but apparently it doesn't work that way, where Fran Lehman snaps his finger and everybody goes, oh, we should be better listeners, and we should be humble, and we should own when our hearts aren't good, and all that kind of stuff. I don't know any way around it, though, because right now there are human questions of compassion versus cruelty, and questions of equality and dignity, and honesty versus deceit, and of domination versus humility on the table. And those are human and Christian questions, and they're bleeding over into this whole political mess. The temptation, though, in a divided moment is to dehumanize the people we perceive to be the dehumanizers. But those we consider our enemies are actually part of the whole. They're part of the family, which is why our friend Andrew DeCourt, in his writings and his verbal sharing, always refers to them as enemy siblings. And every time I hear that, I go, oh, God, yeah, I know, enemy siblings. Even those people that I feel I have to oppose. And that's really the cross. A lot of us were taught a penal substitutionary atonement view of the cross, where big mad God, and he's got to take out the bad stuff about his anger for sin on somebody, so he's got to kill his one and only son, and if he doesn't, then he can't get over how angry he is with us and let us into heaven, and good luck finding that in your New Testament, by the way. But what I'm talking about this morning is seen at the cross in this. Jesus refuses at the cross to destroy us because he sees us as part of the family. And so, yes, he exposes our violent darkness by his act of love. And God will always seek to expose our darkness. There is darkness and light. There's good and evil. There's healthy and unhealthy. There's functional and dysfunctional. And God is trying to wake us up and bring us out of the garbage and into the good stuff, right? So yes, but he exposes our violent darkness by his act of love at the cross. But instead of destroying us, he seeks a way to awaken us and welcome us home. At the cross, Jesus holds the reality of darkness and the light of love together. He doesn't finalize it. Have you ever noticed that about the cross? Like, he doesn't show up and say, yeah, we got darkness and light, and today the hammer comes down and we're sorting it all out. He holds the darkness. The darkness is there, piercing his sides and his feet, mocking him, people thinking they have the world figured out, that they have the world by the tail. Jesus holds that darkness and the light of his love in the same place. He even says, Father, forgive your kids because they don't get it. Your kids, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. What I'm trying to describe to you this morning very imperfectly is that we've been taught to use religion to divide everything. The saved from the unsaved, the Christian versus the world, the good people versus the bad people, and subtly to divide the people who look like us, believe like us, vote like us, make love like us, and on the list goes, from everybody who doesn't. And here's the thing, you'll never be a part of the healing and the reconciliation if that's the software that you run on. You just never will. Because what you've done is you've taken religion and now you're judging everybody else the same way that the world is already judging each other. It's just the same thing in religious clothes. That's why Paul says in Colossians, this is not in my notes, this is a free bonus. This is why Paul says in Colossians, when half the church in that little city of Colossae is telling the other half of the church, got to get circumcised, you can't eat this, you got to have a special feast on this day, you got to do this, you got to do that. Paul takes all those Jewish religious rules that are being laid on those people, and he calls them the basic principles by which the world operates. He puts them takes all that religious stuff, he puts it in the category of worldliness, and he says, since you died with Christ, to the ABCs of how the world operates in its stupidity, why are you bowing down to these rules? Why are you listening to that? Christ came to make you free of all of that. We can't turn religion into just the same old thing human beings are already doing to each other. What does that accomplish? But mostly in our 2,000 years of Christianity, that's what we've been pretty good at. Don't mishear me. I'm not saying that the bad things are good. A lot of horrific things have happened across history, and I know that all kinds of different bad things are happening now, and different kinds of bad things have happened in your life. And what I'm saying is that inside reality, alongside the hard things, there is a mystery of grace. Do you know that passage everyone loves to quote from Romans 8 where Paul says that all things work together for good? You know why we love that passage? We love it because the way we read it is that everything's going to work out. That's how we read it. It all works out good. It all works out good. Everything's going to be fine. You know, we use it as like this little sort of cheerleading reassurance. But that's actually not what Paul's saying. What Paul's actually saying, if you go back and read it, is he's saying that through all the hard parts, God is also working his grace toward the good of restoring our beautiful and glorious humanity. He's saying that God is even using the hard things. He's grabbing them, even though they're not good. And he's co-opting them. He's taking them over. And he's using them in this journey, this adventure of restoring us to our full beauty and glory. Richard Rohr says that faith is being able to meet reality, to not get stuck raging against it forever, or to be ground into powder by it, but to be able to live within it. I don't know how that strikes you, but that strikes me as, oh my gosh. Because what we call reality itself is caught up in a larger connectedness in which we have come to perceive the presence of a greater grace. My example of our parents. Yes, our parents wounded us in some ways. And through all of the good and the bad of our stories, though, we were given life. And then the life we were given ended up being a road littered with 1,000 other graces flowing into the great grace of us really coming to know the big love. And I know by this point you might be thinking, what does this have to do with my life, Pastor Fran? And my answer is everything. I know you have had pain. I know people have hurt you. I know life is hard. I know life can be disappointing and disorienting and confusing. And so what happens is we go through our whole lives with this subconscious tape playing that says, I have to somehow build a life that has a wall that protects me from every possibility of pain and loss. And the hard thing I'm going to tell you this morning is that you're never going to succeed at that. It's just never going to work. And since that's true, what we really need then is to become aware that there is also, additionally, which we did not know, a mysterious grace flowing through reality alongside all those things. And if that's true, and I'm convinced it is, then that grace of connectedness and belovedness is actually what I most need to be aware of. It needs to become the illumination of all my thinking. It needs to become the thing, not the thing I see, the thing by which I see. In my perceptions of life, in how I perceive people and how I interact and approach people. But here's the rub. I have to see it. My awareness has to enlarge. I have to see bigger. And what that means is that I have to spend the rest of my life cleaning these lenses. These lenses. I have to spend the rest of my life doing it because I need to see more, because I need to see deeper, because I need to see what's really flowing through the universe, because I need to see God. I need to see these things. My number one job is not to correct or change everyone else. It's to let myself be changed, to keep seeing better and seeing better and seeing better so that I can see the whole, so that I can see the whole, so that I can see that sometimes it's even through the hard things that grace finds me and changes me. Do you see that, right? Richard Rohr has a 2-word phrase for this that I don't always like. Everything belongs. How does Paul say it in Romans 12? Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. When Jesus speaks the Beatitude to us, you know what he's doing? He's cleaning our lenses. I'll give you the Andrew DeCourt version. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of the heavens. Blessed are the grieving, because they will be comforted. Blessed are the nonviolent, because they will inherit the earth. Wow. Blessed are the hungry and thirsty for justice, because they will be filled. Blessed are the compassionate, for they will be mirrored with compassion. Blessed are the clean-hearted, because they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, because they will be called the children of God. And then Jesus tells us right in the Sermon on the Mount how God is actually the one, how God sees the whole, the very way I'm talking about this morning. What Jesus says is, he says, the Father makes his sun to shine on the good people and the evil people, and he makes his rain fall on the just people and the unjust people. You know what we would be doing with our religion? We'd be saying, we're withholding that rain. Damn it. And right now, until those people figure out what they're supposed to do, Jesus says, well, God sees that there's still all these kids, and he's still going to pour out this grace on everybody. So he makes the rain fall on everybody. He gives everybody rain. He gives everybody sunshine. And then at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, if you build your life this way, on what he's talked about, in the Beatitudes, the goodness and the connectedness and this grace, if you build your life this way, and you understand this belovedness of everyone and everything. That's why you're compassionate, right? Blessed are the compassionate. Why? The merciful. Why? Because you see that everybody is part of this belovedness, right? Not just the people that belong to your group or that you like or that you think are okay or that are doing things the way you want, that everybody's part of this belovedness. And Jesus says, if you perceive this grace running through the whole messy journey, you're like a person who built the house of their life on solid rock. And Jesus says, that house is going to stand. It can stand up to reality. What I'm trying to say is that there's a life that you're supposed to live. And yes, sometimes it's hard. But there's a grace running through the story that you're in. And the more you see it, the more free you'll be and the better you can live that story as you do what is yours to do. And that's one of the fascinating things about life, isn't it? That what's yours to do and what's mine to do is two different things. You know, Larry, it's been yours to fly crazy big airplanes for how many years? Too many years, right? And along that way, how many million conversations have you had with people about life and with God, with co-pilots and flight attendants and passengers on your planes and people, you know, sitting getting your free, you know, happy hour meal at the hotel and whatever you were doing, right? Like, because that's what was yours to do. And you've done it. I know people probably hate when I talk about them. Rita, how many years did you walk with our beloved brother Richard? How many?
55.
55 years. You did what was yours to do, and you did it well. And I know you, and I know that you kept asking, like, what is it? How do I do it? What's the way forward look like? How can I be more loving? How can I do this? And you, as Paul would say, you ran the race and you finished the race. Well, you haven't finished the whole race yet. But you did what was yours to do. Do you see that? You have a journey to take. But you're never going to be able to take that journey well if you rage against reality for the rest of your life or you let it grind you into powder. You have to be able to live in a world where the weeds are growing up with the wheat, but the mystery of grace is flowing through it and it's taking you towards something good, something new. So do what is yours to do, and it's going to be imperfect. But keep cleaning your lenses so you can see better and better and better. You know what we're really describing here? We're describing Trinitarian life. People think the Trinity is a doctrine. No, this is what the Trinity is. The Father loves the Son, who loves the Spirit, who loves the Father. In the early church fathers, in the Eastern church, they were trying to find a way, right? We always try to find language. They were trying to find language to describe what they understood to be this mystery of life within the Trinity, which is really the connectedness of all of reality. And they came up with this Greek word, parachoresis. It sounds like choreography, right? Choresis. It means a circle dance. And that was their theological word for it. They said what God is engaged in is he's engaged in this great circle dance. The Father loves the Son, who loves the Spirit, who loves the Father, who loves the Son, who loves the Spirit. And all the apostles, after being with Jesus and after the darkness and light of the cross, they tell us in their letters that by the Spirit, we have been brought into the circle dance. We've been brought into their word for it was koinonia, the communion. We've been brought into the great connectedness and belovedness that goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on, and it's never going to stop, so what are you worried about? Just get inside it. You just have to get inside it. What we must learn to do now is perceive it and then live in its goodness. This is the word of the Lord to you this morning. Father, we love you. You continue to break off all our broken pictures of the way things really are and bring us to stand before your beautiful pictures of what we are, of what everybody else around us is, and what the great love really, 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 really looks like. Take us on a journey. Continue to take us on a journey, we pray, that we may know your life, dance in your love, and let that love flow through us. Amen.